Well, it's probably not going to be a surprise to many people that Disney's rather reliant on nostalgia. If you look at the theme parks, obviously a lot of the popular things and the things that people love about the parks are from movies from a while ago, and they will still draw crowds. But it has brought the question, and I've thought about it many times, is as Disney's movies recently, some have been successful, but they've had a lot of misses. How are the future rides that they're going to do at Disney World going to look off of these current iteration of IPs that they can use or they're promoting and creating? And in the vein of that, we have a video here from Great American Coasters, which we've reacted to some videos from them before, but some people sent it over to me, and the title of it, I will say, does grab your attention. And the title of the video is Walt Disney World's Future Rides Are Gonna Suck. So I figured this would be a fun video to watch and react to, so that's what we're going to do. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic, and we will just get right into this.
I have a question for you guys. How many of you actually enjoy what Disney's been making lately in terms of their movies? Because, truth be told, I hate a lot of what Disney's been creating.
I agree. Wish was terrible. Wish was a movie. My sister-in-law is a very positive person. We went and saw Wish last Christmas, and we got out of that movie, and she just turned to me and said, that was so bad. And I don't think I've ever heard her really say that. She's the type of person that would just basically be like, well, it was okay. It was fine. And for her to have that reaction was pretty telling. And also our daughter and her cousin also had the same reaction. So it did not hit well with them. So I agree with showing Wish here that I haven't liked a lot of the new things that Disney has done.
Whenever I see a Disney movie nowadays, it just goes right over my head. I watch it, I forget about it, and I move on with my...
Oh. Why do they remind me of Indiana Jones? There's three Indiana Jones movies. None other ones exist. Although I will say the new Indiana Jones video game is very good. That should have been a movie, but I digress.
Life. There have been very few films where I see it in the theater, it leaves a lasting impression, and then maybe 2 weeks to a month later, I rewatch it. That's typically the experience I want to have when watching a film. But over the last, I want to say, 5 years, Disney, they have completely lost my interest. I can't say I've been pleased with the hot garbage they've been producing. All the remakes and sequels, they're just so bad. If they're not infuriating, they're just boring. And
So I've been against the live action remakes for a while. I don't like them in principle. I think the one that was the best was Cinderella. I think that one was actually pretty good. There's been a few that have been okay, but for the most part, I think they're pretty unimaginative, and I don't like just the idea of just taking a popular cartoon and just working to make it live action. It just seems to me a cash grab, and I think audiences are getting rather kind of tired of it on some level. But in the new stuff, obviously Inside Out 2 was a good movie. It surprisingly was pretty good. Moana 2 has been received okay, but Deadpool and Wolverine being the most popular, but that one you're not going to see in theme parks probably because, Deadpool and Wolverine is rated R and not really for families too much.
Probably only enjoyed around 3 movies in the last 5 years, and those would be Luca, Inside Out 2, and Encanto. Everything else,
Encanto's solid. I'll give him that.
they're just nothing. Throw them in the wood chipper, no one would miss them. Even if we just observe the 2023 roster of movies, damn, that was not a good year. I mean, we got a remake, a sequel, another sequel, and another sequel, a remake. Oh, there we go, an original movie. Too bad it was pretty mediocre. Oh, and another original. This one sucked. And another remake. All in all, that was a pretty bad year. I probably only liked one movie.
To be fair, I don't think Haunted Mansion was really that bad. We watched it. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't a great movie, but it also just nothing about it was like super exciting. I think also when it came out was just a weird time. It didn't come out around Halloween. It came out in like July, which is kind of a weird time for that movie.
That's about it. At least this year it seems to be faring a little better. I already expressed how I liked Inside Out 2 and Deadpool. That looks pretty promising. But that doesn't really change the fact that every movie coming after Deadpool, it still looks like that low bar quality. I mean, I'm not going to see a remake of Lilo and Stitch, and I'm definitely not going to see a remake of Snow White.
Snow White's going to lose a lot of money, I think. I'm very curious how that one's going to perform because I think Disney has been delaying that movie for quite some time for that reason.
And the prequel to the Lion King remake, Mufasa, who even asked for this? No. But anyway, how does Disney's movie output relate to the parks? How does Disney making mediocre films translate to rides being built? Well, it seems at Disney they have a pattern. They only have an interest to invest in rides that are based on recent popular IPs. And that kind of worries me. I already expressed at great length of how much I do not like the movies Disney's been making, and I fear that these terrible films will translate themselves into the Disney parks. If we look at recent examples like Star Wars Land, I could probably say for 100% certainty that no one likes it being themed to the reboot trilogy.
Yup. This is my issue with Galaxy's Edge, is they only based it on the sequel trilogy. So they bought the most popular movie franchise in history, and they only use the characters that they themselves created. And you have the most popular villain probably ever in Darth Vader. He's not in here. You have no Luke. You have no Han. You have no Princess Leia. You have none of these characters based on anything that the beloved movies, they decided to, in my opinion, be arrogant and make the entire land off of their sequel trilogy. And as good as Rise of the Resistance is as a ride, and it is a good ride, I think if it was based off of the original trilogy or even the prequel trilogy, they didn't include that either. That has a lot of great elements as well. This ride would be even better. So I agree completely.
I assume would rather see it themed to the original trilogy or even the prequels, the good movies, not
I agree completely.
the crap that Disney made. And if Disney made attractions based on those properties, what if they start making rides on movies that people really didn't like? Did any of you watch Strange World or Wish? Probably not. So how would you feel if they made a land on those movies? I'd assume you'd be indifferent towards them because...
Gosh, Wish was so bad. I know some people are going to say they liked it. There was nothing about that movie that I thought was redeeming at all.
Who cares about these films? I only bring this up because I don't know what Disney's strategy is going forward. They're already running out of movies to adapt in the ride, so they're just scrambling and grabbing any IP that did modestly well in the last 3 years and saying, okay, that's fine, let's just make this into a ride. This feels very reactionary and unconfident on Disney's part, and to be frank, I don't really want rides to be based off movies anymore. Even though Disney, yeah, they are known for adapting movies into rides, but they weren't always like that. Disney used to be known for their original IPs.
Agree completely. I've brought this up many times that there's no original ideas anymore with Disney. Everything is an IP, and that really is an Iger thing. Obviously, Eisner did that to some extent as well, and Walt Disney had rides from movies, but there used to be a good mix of, original ideas, storytelling, and now it's just simply, is a movie make enough money, we can slap an IP of it in the parks and try and get people to come in. And I'm not against IPs necessarily on rides or lands. I think it's really cool to be immersed in a great story of something you love. And you look at Harry Potter with Universal Studios, obviously people enjoy that. But I think when you're looking at the way that everything now is an IP, it just seems to me that I agree they're kind of grasping here. Because for a long time, they said Moana wasn't popular enough to have, basically a ride or an attraction in Disney World. And they seemingly have changed their minds on that as they made Moana 2. And now they have Moana's walk through water splash pad area, whatever, which is fine, but it's not in a ride. It's just a water walk-through area. And I think a lot of that is because it was the most popular thing on Disney Plus. But still, I do agree with him that it seems they're getting a little reactionary, kind of grasping at straws in terms of things to put in. I would also point out Tiana's by Adventure was not a box office success. I mean, if you look at that movie, did not make much money, and they decided to put that as a main attraction to replace a very popular attraction in Splash Mountain. And I don't really think many people were asking to do that. But again, they did it anyways, and they did it in both parks.
The parks. Rides weren't based on IPs. They were their own property. Pirates of the Caribbean? That ride isn't based on the pirate movies. The movies are based on the ride. Same with Jungle Cruise and the Haunted Mansion. The rides predated all the films, and they were built and got funded not because some IP was backing them. No, they were just genuine good ideas that Disney had a lot of confidence in, and it paid off. And it's not even just these 3 examples. Big Thunder Mountain, I don't see a movie backing that. It's just a fun concept of a Western ride taking place in the Badlands with a mine train zooming around the rockwork.
Although I've often thought Big Thunder Mountain would make a cool movie because I do love Westerns. I feel like it could potentially, if you actually had good writers, a good director, you could make a movie that would be kind of a fun movie around Big Thunder Mountain.
Not a lot of story to it, but it's just good old fun. Space Mountain is just a roller coaster in the dark with a disco ball projecting stars all around you. Very simple concept, but it's one of the most popular rides of the park. The idea for Disney to build their own rides that aren't based in any movies, this isn't some groundbreaking idea that was a quick phase in their history. No, it's basically what jump-started the Disney parks, and is what essentially created Disneyland. Walt Disney, he didn't envision his first park to be a showcase of all his movies. At the time, he only had about 25 films. Half of them were animated, and most of them were pretty unpopular. Pinocchio, Bambi, Fantasia, they weren't cult classics like they are today. They had to marinate for a few decades in the public eye before they even got a following. So when he built Disneyland, he wanted each section of the park to be something he was passionate about. He built Frontierland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, sections that were supposed to represent Disney and America as a whole. Walt Disney was a patriotic entrepreneur, and he didn't like to rehash the same ideas over and over again. Disneyland was its own separate entity that did its best to differentiate itself from the movies. And for the longest...
Boy, those days are long gone. I think, anytime they talk about what would Walt do, I always kind of chuckle because I don't think that they really honestly thought that for a very long time. And there's, you don't get Walt Disneys don't grow on trees. So somebody like Walt coming around, more than likely he's not going to come around again. And it's always just, it kind of annoys me how they give it lip service, but obviously through their actions, they don't do the things Walt would have done. They just don't. So I kind of always been annoyed when we hear Iger sit there. I go sit in Walt's, I think they remade his office. I go sit in there and think, what would Walt do? I'm like, no, you don't. Like, if you thought that and you actually were really, really contemplating that, you wouldn't be doing the things that you do. And not that everything has been terrible, but it's not the things that Walt would have done. I think that's very, very evident if you're willing to look at what Walt Disney did in his history and what the company does now.
Time the Disney parks carried on this ideology, even long after Walt Disney's death in 1966. Parks like Epcot, that wasn't supposed to be an IP dumping ground. That was a city of the future that morphed into a permanent World's Fair. Half the park was to showcase future ideas, and the other half was to represent the world. Even Hollywood Studios, that park wasn't about movies per se. It was more on the creation of movies.
Well, let's be honest. Hollywood Studios, which was MGM Studios, was created basically because Universal Studios was creating their theme park, and Michael Eisner got word of it ahead of time and rushed it to basically get it open before Universal Studios with a very similar concept. So it was supposed to be like putting, backstage areas and like live sets and things like that, but it very much was also a competitive thing to get it open and done before Universal Studios did.
It was meant to represent the talented people behind the films. And then Animal Kingdom, the entire idea of that park was supposed to be man's connection to nature. In actuality, it was supposed to be a copycat of Busch Gardens Tampa, but, Disney, they made it their own thing. But as you can see, Disney, they were very well versed in making original products. So what exactly changed? What made Disney flip their mindset from original rides to movie-based rides? Well, if we go back in time, we could see that Disney, they did have a few IP-driven rides sprinkled here and there. They were nothing major. It was like Dumbo's Flying Elephants or Alice in Wonderland and Pinocchio. Very mild garnishing, though, seen more as stepping stones for bigger attractions. It wasn't until around 1998 where Disney flipped this mindset. And I believe it started with one ride called Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. Now this dark ride, it was installed near the end of the Disney Renaissance and when Pixar was just starting. It's a simple shooting ride to earn points with very rudimentary blacklight theming. The main reason this attraction made a big impact for the Disney parks is because Disney, they just kind of shoehorned this ride in the middle of Tomorrowland. It doesn't fit in thematically, it's kind of distracting, but Disney, they didn't really care. They just plopped it under the people mover and moved on.
It doesn't fit in there. And also, I hate the shooting system in this ride. I really wish that you could pull it out and shoot it more, but it's a cute ride. Our kids enjoy it, but it does frustrate me being a competitive person. I much more enjoy like Toy Story Mania with the way that system works versus Space Ranger Spin.
And once this attraction made its debut, we started to see more IP-driven rides, like Winnie the Pooh in 1999, Magic Carpets with Aladdin, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. But then after 2010, things really hit the fan. And I think it was all because of one big reason: the Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
Yep. I wonder if he was going to mention that. Completely agree.
When Universal opened this land, the entire theme park industry was shocked. There was never really anything like Harry Potter prior, an entire land based on a movie with extreme attention to detail, a multitude of merchandising opportunities, and a high-tech dark ride that was pretty technologically advanced at the time. Universal had a massive win when they opened Harry Potter, and Disney, they were kind of panicking after this, so they decided to make a lot
Sounds familiar.
of reactionary lands to try to combat Harry Potter. No joke, after Harry Potter, around 2014, they announced Toy Story Land, Star Wars Land, and Pandora the World of Avatar. They were trying as hard as they could to rival Universal, and that meant digging into their library of movies to try to get as many theme park lands out as possible. And you know what? It did work for a while. The public did seem to like what they were doing. The problem is, they swung too far in this direction, where they're completely foregoing anything that's not based on a movie, becoming so unsure in what they're making that they have to focus group during the D23 Expo, getting audience input to what they're announcing.
I have nothing to add. I just completely agree with him.
Disney, they used to set the trends for the industry, and now
Yes, that is exactly it. Disney are the ones that set the trend, and at some point they just became reactionary. And I do agree, Wizarding World freaked them out. And they clearly, after that, if you look at the things they brought online, and Iger tried to go back and say that Universal was trying to catch up to them because of all the things they've done in the parks. Well, if you look at the timelines, they clearly announced these things after things that Universal was doing, and essentially Disney was being reactionary to that, trying to match or one-up what they were doing. Now, I think Pandora is a cool land. I don't think Avatar as a franchise has a huge following. It makes a lot of money, but there's like no cultural impact with it. But Pandora is a good land. Toy Story is okay. I've never been a fan of Galaxy's Edge. I think that's a big swing and a miss. And again, you talk about the Star Wars franchise, not as much now, but at one point, you would have had people kicking down doors to go to a Star Wars land. And now it's, for a lot of people, just sort of like, yeah, it's there. It's fine. Like, I don't think you would have thought that 10, 20 years ago about a Star Wars land in Disney World.
Now they just feel like a reluctant follower. Whatever Universal makes, they just seem to react to it. And all we see from the company nowadays is little to no investment and half-baked ideas that are based on whatever did well a few years ago. If they keep doing this, eventually the vault, it's gonna be empty. They're gonna have almost no IP to pull from. And then we're gonna see the exact same thing they do in Hollywood. Just remake and rehash the exact same ride over and over again. I mean, we already see this happening. Do we need a Toy Story Land at Hollywood Studios and a Toy Story ride at the Magic Kingdom? Do we need a Finding Nemo ride at Epcot and a Finding Nemo show at Animal Kingdom? Everything will eventually just blend together, and soon every park will have no identity for themselves. They will all be a giant dumping ground for intellectual property. It doesn't matter what goes where, whether it makes sense or not. It will all exist under the Disney corporate umbrella. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad.
I mean, I agree with most of the points he's making. I think that a lot of things Disney has been doing is completely reactionary. And, I think in terms of, it does start affecting the parks whenever they don't have the, if they're going so IP heavy, so you don't have the massive hits in the movie side like you used to, and that's what you're relying on to go into the parks, that does become a problem. And I've also had questions about the IPs that are used. I still, to this day, don't understand, given the Frozen success, why there's only one ride in Epcot in the World Showcase of a Frozen ride, and why you wouldn't do an Arendelle. That makes more sense in Magic Kingdom than a Cars-based attraction to do Arendelle. You look at what they did in Japan with it, and it looks fantastic. Same thing with, like, Tangled. I think Tangled is the best princess movie they've ever made, very popular, and you just have restrooms. Like, I have a lot of questions about the IPs that they do choose to use. For instance, look at this, like Tron. Like, the ride is fine, but Tron itself does not have really a following. I don't think anybody's being like, oh man, I can't wait for the next Tron movie or the Tron ride. I'm sure there are fans, but overall, it's a movie franchise. Well, there's been 2 movies. I think they're making a 3rd one, but it's not something that, in my opinion, deserves to be in a theme park as a brand new ride. Why even put an IP on this? They could have just called this Tomorrowland Racers or something like that, but everything having to be an IP, and many times it just doesn't make any sense. I've had questions about Tiana's Bayou Adventure in terms of, if you look at Tiana's movie, Princess and the Frog didn't really do very well. There's been no sequel to it. There's been no show. And so there's just the choice of IPs I've had questions about, on top of the fact that, they've had questionable success. Now, obviously, 2024 was a better year. I would imagine Inside Out 2 would get some sort of attraction or ride, considering the success of that movie being such a massive hit. But, when Pixar was just rolling out hits, that was kind of easy to do. But now that they're not as much and there's a lot more competition on the animation side, they don't have the hits that they used to. It's not the same company that it was. And even things like Lion King. How is there not a Lion King ride in Animal Kingdom? So it's not only the fact that it's all IPs, which I wish they would get back to doing more original, inventive ideas, but I don't think they want to take the risk. And I think Disney being reactionary, they're also risk adverse, and they're just trying to put an IP in here because they think, well, if people like this, they'll go see it. Let's just do that and not take the risk of trying to tell a story, even if that's something that people, I think, would go along with if it was done well. But you could have an issue as well, we've talked about, where a lot of the talent has left Imagineering, and we've seen lots of examples given the Haunted Mansion gift shop, seeing Tiana Bayou Adventures ride issues, seeing the new the overhaul of Epcot, and a lot of that stuff being very underwhelming, of questions about the talent of Imagineering. A lot of people have left and gone to Universal or just retired. And are they capable of doing it? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask, especially in a time period when they're going head-to-head with Universal Studios and Epic Universe. And a lot of the things that Universal's doing are things that Disney used to do really well. The small details, even with Epic Universe. Celestial Park isn't a completely original land in that park. And Universal is not known for original IPs. I mean, they legitimately were created to put you into the movies, and they've kind of almost switched spots here, because now Universal is doing original things and really going the extra mile. And I think Universal is leading the initiative or the creative end of things when it comes to theme parks. I think it's very evident that they are. They're pushing the envelope, whereas Disney, again, is just reactionary. So I do agree that as it stands now, the future slate of rides, if everything is going to be IP-based, they may not be very good in terms of that. Now, you could have good rides based off of not so great movies, but then why would you just do an IP off of a movie that really doesn't have that big of a fan base would be the other question you have. At that point, you should just do a very original ride and really try and do some storytelling in the theme parks. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see if that happens. If Disney, does a reset at some point, maybe the next CEO that comes in has a new mandate. I'm not holding my breath. I guess it's possible. But I think as this continues to go on between Universal and Disney World, that Disney may have to at some point get back to their roots, do the things they used to do. And that's one thing, is Disney, in my opinion, also has slowly becoming like Universal. And I don't like the idea. I love things that Universal is doing, but I don't want to see Disney basically just try and be Universal light. I don't think that's where they're strong. I don't think that's where they're historically at. And they have a lot of advantages in terms of size and history of the parks with Walt Disney that I don't think they're currently taking advantage of very well, in terms of they just tend to replace rides and not really expand the parks for capacity. So I think overall the concept of the thoughts going into the theme parks have been kind of short-sighted, reactionary, and just going after what they think will be big pops with IPs, but not really into the storytelling immersion aspect of the theme parks that historically they have done, especially look at what Walt was doing and the things he wanted to do. You look at the legendary Imagineers, Tony Baxter and Joe Rohde. Those days are long gone in terms of that, and I do hope on some level, a lot of people point to and say, all you do is criticize Disney. I criticize Disney because they set the standard of what of theme parks, of what you were to expect from immersion and things, the small details that they would do, different colored trash cans in a transition area, the sounds, all these little things that they made such a big deal. They have lost kind of their way with that, and I just want them to get back to doing those things. And I want Disney and Universal to be major players in the theme park wars and going against each other, because at the end of the day, the consumer wins. You get two theme parks that are going, against each other for your attention and your money to give you the best that they can, and that, I think, is a great thing. This is why I think competition is good. And at some point, surely Disney will have to respond in some way, reevaluate their ways. But as of right now, I do agree with this video that is the current slate of movies, in terms of creativity being lacking in the movies, for the most part. Not everything. Obviously, this year was pretty good, but, looking at the past few years, not the best home runs in the world. And obviously, I think you're seeing the creative side of things in the theme parks lacking as well, but hopefully those get revamped. But as of now, yeah, if they base a lot of these rides off the current IPs they've had in the last few years, I don't think it's going to be so hot. I don't think it's going to be so good. And I don't think it's going to be anywhere near Harry Potter, Super Nintendo World, and things like that Universal is doing. So again, this is from Great American Coasters. I'll put a link to this video in the description. Go check it out. Follow them. They're a great channel. And if you want to go look at it yourself, you can go do that. And maybe let them know we sent you over here if you do go do that. But either way, that's going to be it though for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, do you think Disney World's future rides are going to suck? Until next time, we will see you in the parks.